Hello, everyone, and welcome to this rapid fire edition of the Raw Rugby podcast. I'm Christy, Doran, and it's the penultimate round of Super Rugby. It's all heating up. Mathematically, everyone still very much a chance, but if you're Waratahs fans, it's all but over. Maths, I didn't really care for it too much in school, but I don't have to be an Einstein to work out the fact that they need a lot of things to go their way and them to pick up bonus point victories along the way. But to discuss all the round 14 action, Mr. Tony Harper, where the heck have you been?
Thanks for asking, Christy. I have been away for some time, partly for enjoyment, but also partly because my old man passed away. Now, he wasn't a massive rugby fan. I think the last rugby game he would have sat through was Ipswich Grammar First 15 when I was playing for them in 1983. But he was a voracious reader of the Raw and would pick me up on various spelling mistakes that I made along the way. He did instill in me a great passion for sport. So I just want to say thanks to the old man, wherever he is right now, probably sitting there worrying about how the Broncos are going to be going this weekend. Somehow, despite coming from Wales via Ipswich in the UK, he was a massive mungo, but I never held that against him, mate.
Well, welcome back, and your father's not the only person that will go through your copy with a fine-tooth comb and pick up the odd spelling error. All the raw punters out there, thanks very much. Look, it's been a tough week for you as well, because we know that Arsenal fell down. You had been looking studiously at the table and the standings for not just weeks but months. Unfortunately, they just fell short against Man City.
Sport can be crushing, can't it? Because it is a 9 to 10 month. And, I'm listening to podcasts all week and I'm sitting there, and then there are various stages where you dare to dream, and then, it's out of your hands and it's in your hands, and then something happens elsewhere. And then you get, a club down the road, coached by an Australian, all their fans decide they'd rather lose a game and miss out on Champions League than actually let you win a title. So all that comes into it. It is another level, and I have, yes, there has been pain associated to that as well. But we move on, and it's only 8 weeks, and we can go through this whole suffering all over again. It's been 20 years. What's another 12 months, eh?
Well, we digress. It's a little bit of a tangent that we've gone on, but look, this is how the standings are at the moment. The top 4 is sorted. The Blues, the Hurricanes, the Brumbies and the Chiefs will make up the top 4. How they finish up remains to be seen, but the Brumbies do have an outside chance of finishing in the top 2, with both the Blues and the Hurricanes probably with the more difficult matches to come, whereas the Brumbies, they wouldn't take it for granted, but they would expect to be too good for the Rebels and the Western Force in the final round. We'll talk a bit more about that in a second. The Reds, the Rebels, Highlanders and Drua make up 5th to 8th, with the Western Force hot on their heels, 19 points, 2 points behind the 8th place Fiji Drua on 21. And the Drua will take on the Highlanders this weekend in Dunedin, who are 7th as well. So there's a fair bit at stake. The Crusaders on 15 points in 10th, who would have possibly dreamt of that at the start of the year, they would have only won 2 matches. And lo and behold, the Waratahs too, having won just 2 matches in both of those against the Crusaders. Extraordinary. We know that Darren Coleman this week on Tuesday, it was announced that Darren Coleman would be in his final season with the Waratahs. Had a really gracious, dignified press conference on Wednesday afternoon, and you can read all about that on theraw.com.au. But without further ado, let's get into it, Harbs. You're a man who brings some stats, and you also know all the ins and outs of the sides this weekend. But we're going to start across the ditch. Waikato should be a belter. It's the Chiefs up against the Hurricanes. What are some of the talking
we've
points?
got well, this weekend we've got that rare beast in Super Rugby, which is a 3-day weekend. So, if you find yourself with nothing to do at midday or a few minutes past on Sunday, you can actually sit down and watch some rugby as well. And as you mentioned earlier, that is the Highlanders and Drua. So it is, a match that'll have an impact on the top 8. But you're right. We start with the 4th place Chiefs hosting the 2nd place Hurricanes. The Hurricanes captain Brad Shields suffered a strained quad in training this week. He will miss out on the game, but he is expected to be back, perhaps even for the final round, but certainly for the finals. They're also missing Tyrell Lomax and Duplessis Carifi after beating Moana Pacifica. But they have brought in a lot more depth into there. The Chiefs, meanwhile, are keeping it really stable. 3 changes only in the 23 and none in the starting 15. How do you kind of see this one? It's an exciting way to kick off a really decisive weekend.
So I just can't believe that you spoke for less than a couple of minutes there. That's amazing how quickly, and you've pronounced everyone Duplessis Carifi. Indeed, spot on. You haven't missed a beat since you've been away. Look, I don't know who I'm going to tip with this one just yet. I think the home ground advantage is important, but if I'm the Hurricanes, I'm hoping to host. I'm hoping to finish top of the pops and push for a home final if they continue on their winning ways. Look, it's a pretty formidable back row despite the loss of Brad Shields, and he's the captain. He's the guy who's been able to bring it all together this year after internationals for England and returning from overseas. You'd look at it though, and it's got Braden Iosi, Peter Larkai, and Devon Flanders in that back row. That's a really strong back row. Tossie comes in at tight head prop. They're still missing Asafa Amua, so that'll be a bit of a blow for the Canes. But that backline's hot, and we know that they were far too good last week for Moana Pacifica. Barrett, Love, Morby, Naholo, Proctor. There's some points in that. And the Chiefs weren't brilliant last week against the Rebels either. So, I'm umming and ahhing. I'm going to go the Chiefs but it'll be an absolute belter. It's the perfect way to start a Friday night. Who have you got?
I think the Chiefs as well. I think the fact that they are, keeping it together, keeping it stable there. But again, there are a few very close matches this week, and that is obviously one of them to start it off. We go from there to Brumbies, who are 3rd, against the Rebels, who are 6th. And you talked about the Brumbies looking for a top 2. They're actually an outside chance of 1st. It'll need a bit of an implosion by the Blues, but that top 2 and potentially a home semi-final should be the goal. But the Rebels win there will secure them finals football. I mean, they have the inside running on that, but they're still not 100% safe in that 8 yet. The Brumbies are bringing Billy Pollard back at hooker. Tom Hooper comes in for Caden Neville into the 2nd row, with Nick Frost staying at number 6. And in the backs, Corey Toole is a welcome addition back after his absence. The Rebels have lost Carter Gordon after a post-match HIA last week. You could probably tell us more about that one. They do welcome back Wallabies Andrew Kellaway and Taniela Tupou. So it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back for the Rebels in this really, really important game. What was the situation with Carter? What was the incident involved?
Oh, well, we know that Carter left last week. He copped a high shot. He got taken off. He did return, and it looked like at one stage he might not because he had the big heavy coat on at halftime, but he did return and almost got the Rebels across the line. The continuity went out the window for the 10 minutes leading up to halftime when Carter was off. So it's a big blow to not have him. Jake Strawn moves in at fly half for the Rebels, but it's a really tough one. Yeah, Andrew Kellaway, he'll add plenty, and we know that Taniela Tupou off the bench will be outstanding too, but no Josh Kemeny, that's another big blow. Rob Leota comes back into the starting side, but it ekes away at your depth, and that's probably the big thing. I see the Brumbies being too strong here. It's a pretty settled side, and the fact that Corey Toole comes onto the left wing, it's an opportunity for him to also push his test claims. I think it's at the end of this month, there'll be a wider Wallaby squad kind of selected where you'll get a whole bunch of players where their season's over, be it the Waratahs or the Force or whoever it might be, that there's an extended squad, which is kind of unofficial, which will then be trimmed down. But we'll get a bit more of an idea as to whether or not Corey Toole will feature later on in June, I would imagine, because the Brumbies will be definitely going to the finals and probably to the last four. But I think the Brumbies will be too good at home, really well drilled, generally speaking, and they've shown their ability over the last few weeks, despite a faltering scrum, to get over the line against a Crusaders team, a Hurricanes team, a Drua. They've found some form at the right time of the year, and now it's about getting that set piece, putting that under pressure, and you don't get many bigger tests than a Rebels front row at the moment, because that is the one area where they can really go and target the Brumbies.
I think you're right there. I can't see the Rebels. I kind of figure the Rebels played extremely well in losing last week. That might have been their grand final. I feel that emotion wrapped up in the final game of the season. And I think that, bouncing back from that and seeing it through without Gordon might be really tough.
And I'll just add as well, we know that there's so many off-field discussions around the Rebels' future that earlier this week, Rugby Australia, in fact, went down to Amy Park and spoke to all the players, the staff at the Rebels, tried to give them an update. There was no official update. There's two conclusions here that'll come about in the next fortnight, you would imagine. One being the Rebels survive and live on beyond 2024 and players can remain at home. Or secondly, they're culled, and then Rugby Australia, part of their meetings and their individual meetings, was to try to find out a little bit more around where players might want to go. Have they got family in particular states which would help a transition? Is there a side that you'd be better suited to? Might you be stuck behind several others if it's a positional group that is strong? So all those sorts of conversations bubbling along in the background can't be good when you're approaching a big game against the Brumbies this week. But we'll move on, and it's a Saturday that starts with the Waratahs, who still have Darren Coleman as their coach for the remainder of the season. But this looks like a difficult challenge, heading across the ditch to take on Moana Pacifica in Auckland.
Well, they're 12th placed, Moana Pacifica 11th. It's a real battle for the wooden spoon, and it's the two teams you'd expect to be there after the way they've played. Darren Coleman has been cruelled by injuries. He did speak a bit about that and about the opening run of games that really set his team back this season. You mentioned how gracious he was. I was really impressed by the way that he kind of stood there and put his hand up and said, look, I have to make selection decisions every week, and if people aren't performing, they get dropped, and I haven't been performing and I've been dropped. But you do have to have a lot of sympathy for him. Very well publicised issues in the pack, and now they're on loan prop from Glasgow. Enrique Peretto is out with a neck injury after one match, and they've had to dig into, is it Brisbane Club Rugby, Christy, for a replacement there?
Yeah, it's pretty much your old backyard, your stomping ground. But yes, they have. And look, there's a couple of other changes. Ned Hannigan returns, but no Lockie Swinton, so out with a neck injury. So the injuries don't stop for the Tars. The big one, I think, is Tane Edmund returning at 10. And I hit out of that selection a week ago when Will Harrison was picked ahead of Tane Edmund, despite the fact that he's heading overseas at season's end. Tate Edmund's future still in the balance. But he returns. No Will Harrison this weekend. Jack Bowen comes onto the bench, who's had very limited time over the last couple of years. The other...
Okay, look, we talked about injuries, right? But I do want to ask you this before you move on. Like, how much of this chopping and changing of his backline, because he's done it with his wingers, he's done it with his fullback, he's done it with his fly halves. Like, how disruptive must that be for this team?
I actually don't think very disruptive. You look at the Hurricanes, they've been making big changes in particular matches, and those other guys, it's not like they've been dropped out of the 23 at times. They've been put onto the bench and then brought on with half an hour to go, and they often blow teams away. I think you start to look at and critique selection more and more when things aren't going your way. But I think they've just across the board not been good enough this year, be it in the front row, in the forward pack, in the back line. Balls have been dropped, balls have been thrown into touch. At times, goal kicks haven't been made when they needed to. So I think there's a collective cultural thing that needs to be addressed right at the moment with the Waratahs, and seemingly that's going to happen with a change of coach and probably a change of the complete coaching staff too, and several players leaving the Waratahs too at season's end. The other change, Izzy Parisi coming onto the right wing, no Tristan Riley this week. So yeah, they're still got a reasonable side with several Wallabies, and you look at that midfield, Lalakai Faketi's still there, Hannigan, there's Jed Holloway. There's enough there up against a Moana Pacifica side, Harps, that will test them, but it's just the front row which has to stand up.
Well, they've kept it stable as well. They've made one change, and that's at number 9 with Isaiah Halo. I'm not sure if I spelt that right, pronounce that right, but I see a halo around you some days as well, Christy. I think that stability, I mean, that, you know, it's okay being a stable side if you're a good side, but they're just really lacking, aren't they, again this season? You have to wonder what their path forward is. I mean, you think that the Waratahs have, you know, that they have it in their locker to bounce back, but you just wonder about Moana Pacifica and what the future holds for this franchise.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. It's a question being asked on both sides of the ditch as well. I think the thing with the Moana Pacifica at the moment, they haven't been able to fire enough shots. Early in the season, they were getting a bit more forward momentum. They were getting across the gain line. They were able to convert opportunities inside the 22. They just haven't been able to do that recently. And the sides that they've actually come up against, the Hurricanes, they've also, you know, the Chiefs, like they're taking on New Zealand opposition more often than the Aussies are. So it's not an easy situation for Moana, but I think it's, I might tip them this week. I think the Waratahs will definitely lift. I reckon now that Coleman's going, they'll want to play for the coach. It makes everyone just take a breath and reflect for a moment. The pressure will be somewhat off Darren Coleman's shoulders. Maybe that's actually seeing me flip it back to the Tars, but I just think that front row, that's really challenging because it really disrupts the entire forward pack and your starter plays. So, you're a brave man to bet it either way, I think.
Yes, I made a few mistakes tipping the Waratahs during the season. Then I declared in the tipping column that I was never doing it again, and I'm sticking to that. So backing up after that, we've got Crusaders and Blues. Obviously, that is a massive rivalry in Super Rugby, but they will not be used to going in with one team 10th and one team in first place. This is like throw it out there. But the Blues are welcoming back Rico Ioane. Stephen Perifetta comes in at number 15. Interesting to see this week that Beauden Barrett was back training with the Blues, and they were seeking a clearance for him to join for the finals. That seemed like a bit of a long shot. And with Perifetta coming back in, it probably takes a bit of that anxiety away from them. Ethan Blackadder is back at number 7 for the Crusaders. The perpetually injured Ethan Blackadder, who's back for the first time since late April. They'll have muscle memory of beating the Blues, but will they have anything else in their locker, mate?
Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, the battle of the South and North Islands, I think the Blues have to win. They've just got too much strength. The forward pack, the scrum challenge, the battle is going to be really interesting. Like the Crusaders hammered the Brumbies there last week, and it's a concern for Joe Schmidt when Alan Alatoa and James Slipper struggle so much against a Crusaders side that's got Joe Moody and Fletcher Neal, who's probably been the best tight head this year across Super Rugby. Cody Taylor, second week for him, so he'll be a bit better off the back of last week, you would imagine. And it's another week of continuity with Fergus Burke there at fly half for the Crusaders. I think it's really interesting that Perifetta's gone to fullback, because at the start of the year, it was Perifetta that fly half, and now he's gone back to fullback, which is where he ended last year with Beauden Barrett more often than not at fly half, calling the shots. So once again, maybe not the trust there yet with Stephen, but at the same time, he's missed the last 6 weeks or so with injuries. So maybe it allows him just to get eased back into the action too. I think the Blues have to win, but you wouldn't rule out the Crusaders. I can't tip the Crusaders because I've tipped them more often than not this year, and it's always come back to bite me as well. So I'm going to go the Blues. If they do, it really puts them, it kind of almost sews up top spot, the minor premiership. They're 3 points clear of the Hurricanes. So it's a big one for them to allow for them going into that last week where they'll take on the Chiefs, which is another big game. So it's an opportunity for them to get creative if they want, leading into the final series. Harps, one match left to play.
Two matches.
2 games left to play.
Yep.
I think forgetting about that Sunday one.
Reds and Force are up first. I'm reading a comment on our team story today where someone was saying, look, the Reds are safe. Do we all want the Force to win this one so that we get to ensure another Australian team in the top 8? I'm sure the Reds won't look at it that way. They've made 8 changes. They've got a new front row. Sarah Uru starts. Tom Liner's back at 10. Tim Ryan's back in the starting team. No Suli Vunivalu for obvious reasons. The Force have only made 1 change. Ronan Leahy, a junior Wallaby winger, is starting. What do you know of him? How excited should we be? How does he fit in the Wallabies power rankings?
He's not in the Wallabies power rankings, but he's been right at the front of the junior Wallabies power rankings because he's been playing some good footy for the junior Wallabies. He was a key part of the side last year as well. He's got a lot of gas, I can tell you that. He's quick. He's a good try scorer, so he's kind of in a bit the same vein as the junkyard dog, Tim Ryan. So I think that'll be a good matchup, and I like the fact that he's just being thrown straight out there. Chase Tiatia on the bench. He's been a try scorer for the Force this year, but yeah, like in the dying stages, having someone like a Chase Tiatia come in for the last half an hour could be a really smart move there from Simon Cron. Yeah, good changes for the Reds. It'll be interesting to see if Tom Liner, how he comes back, because he's missed the last few weeks, I think a hamstring injury. So that's a key change. And he's definitely in the reckoning for a Wallabies call-up. I don't think he'll be necessarily in the 23, but I can see him being in that wider squad. I'm going to tip the Reds. I think playing at home, they'll probably be too good. They're tight 5, a bit more settled. And I like the fact that Matt Fesler comes in. Alex Hodgman's missed a couple of weeks. He got some minutes under his belt in club rugby last week. I think the Reds will be too good. Who have you got?
No, I agree with you. I tipped them. I was actually probably the only one who tipped them in Fiji last week. If it hadn't been for a couple of outrageous trips and a couple of sensational brain farts, no, maybe they were a better chance anyway. I like the Reds.
Yeah, the line out, I imagine, will be one of the things they would want to fix after that being an issue for them last week. Okay, the last game of the penultimate round, the Highlanders and the Drua, 7th up against 8th.
Yeah, Sunday beers. The Highlanders have lost their informed centre, Tanielu Talea. He has a suspected MCL from last week's match. Interesting that it was revealed as suspected today. You would have thought that all those scans would have been done by now, but that's what they're calling it. Cameron Miller also is ruled out after being poleaxed last week. Interesting news for the Drua, Caleb Munns, the flying Fijian star, is back by the bench after a long, long layout.
Yeah, and that's big because he got injured last year just on the eve of the World Cup, and it was a heartbreaking setback. It didn't necessarily slow their progress in the World Cup. Sorry, Eddie Jones. But, yeah, it's good. And it's probably smart coming back via the bench. Isaiah Armstrong Ravula has been really good this year, and he's made in Super Rugby campaign. So, back in the incumbent, they're coming off the back of a win, but I'm pretty sure the stats are they've lost 20 of their last 21 matches on the road. Can it change? I think the loss of the fly half Miller there for the Highlanders will be perhaps telling. That's their second fly half that's gone after Reece Patchell suffered a pectoral injury earlier in the year. So, yeah, it'll be closer than I think people expect, but I think the Highlanders just.
I'm tipping I'll be absolutely exhausted by that stage and ready for a beer post-match with you not around this weekend. I believe you're flying off to France. Are you going there to bring us back a Waratahs coach?
Well, Michael Checker is still in Paris, so yeah, I'm off there to a wedding, not my own, but yep, good to see some old school friends over the coming weeks. But yeah, looking forward to checking in with a few Wallabies whilst I'm over there. I've got to say, I'm pretty devastated the fact that Toulouse were hosting La Rochelle, Will Skelton's La Rochelle, on the first weekend of June. They've decided to make it a 9 p.m. game on Sunday night. So that's the French top 14 for you. You don't quite know the scheduling too far out. That only got revealed about a week ago. So that's seen a slight change in the itinerary. But
is that past your bedtime or something?
Oh, it pretty much is these days. I'll tell you that. What I will say, Matt Tamur back on the podcast next week. You'll probably have me for the next couple of weeks as well. But you might have a new host for Teens Week next week, being the final round of Super Rugby. In the meantime, Harps, we better get back to it. But good to see your face and talk all things rugby.
Yeah. It's great to chat to you. I've just got to hunt down whoever decided to let you take leave with 2 weeks to go in the Super Rugby season. So I'll get on that. You get your passport, make sure it's all ready, and all your packing for your young and ready. And yeah, I'm sure we'll catch up.
Thanks, Harps. Enjoy the rugby.